Imagine now you are in that scenario and you have just seen 18 members of your own family murdered, slaughtered, the companions. Although you want to mourn them, you still have a huge responsibility to the endless number of women and children that are present there as well. They haven't eaten, they haven't drunk, they have lost their fathers, their brothers, their uncles, their friends. And that being the case, Bibi Zainab salamullahi alayha first and foremost had the mindset to ensure that they were able to look after their own emotional outlook and also their own physical and personal health. So that was her primary concern on the night of Sham al-Ghariba. Within that, she also wanted to ensure that she set the precedent that the others can mourn, but she needs to be the pillar of strength at all times. And that means that if she needs to stay awake to guard the tents whilst the rest rest, she can stay awake and the rest of them will be able to fall asleep for a few minutes. As they left Karbala, as they left the plains of Karbala, that's one of the first times she could really begin to mourn. So the narrations specify that instead of being taken around the plains of Karbala, they were forced to go through, which means they literally walked through the piles of dead bodies, but specifically of their own family members. And one says that she was sitting upon a horse, and that as she saw the broken body of her brother Abu Abdullah, she flung herself from the horse to the floor, and with her hands, which were bound, put her hands underneath the body of Abu Abdullah, almost as if to raise it towards the sky. And she says, Ilahi taqabbal minna hadha al-qurban. Oh my Lord, accept this qurbani from us, accept this sacrifice from us.
Imam Hussain had told her that you are responsible after me. Even though Imam Hussain delivered that message to Imam Sajjad, but he says it very clearly to her that you are responsible after me, even for Sajjad. And that's when people see that when in the Sham-e-Ghariban, for example, in the late day, in the early eve of Ashura, when the tents are burned, she helps Imam Sajjad out of the tents.
They needed to show what had taken place in Karbala and beyond in order for people to know it. Otherwise, we ourselves wouldn't know. Quran says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ. Ask those people of remembrance, those people who are part and parcel of the issue. So they wanted to express the event so that people could come and ask them more and more.
كيف يرتجى أكلة أكباد الأزكياء كيف وكيف يرتجى من نبت لحمه من دماء الشهداء وكيف يستبطئ في كرهنا أهل البيت من نظر إلينا بالبغض والعداء ثم تقول غير متأثم ولا مستعظم لا أهلوا واستهلوا فرحا ثم.
And at that point you can imagine the reaction of hundreds of people. So this was her public rites of remembrance. She was able to demonstrate clearly the situation of Ahlul Bayt. When it came to the situation within their own household, there then became times when they were alone. So for example, inside the prisons they were now alone. When they returned back to Karbala, they were generally alone, although we have Jabir al-Ansari and his hosts who were there as well, but they were generally alone. At this point, they would weep amongst themselves. They would recount to each other.
So it was more of giving the right picture of her father and her brothers, the two brothers, Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain alayhi salam. So it wasn't so much of the institution of mourning. It was, yes, she did mourn, she did read the Masahib in the court of Yazid even, and in the court of Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad and other places, she did. She mentioned how he was killed, how, but it was more to do with the Holy Quran and the Holy Prophet, that we are the family. Imam Hussain said, even if the Christians had the riding horse of Jesus today, they would respect it. And I am the direct grandson of the Holy Prophet. And you are willing to kill me. And that's what she took forward and spread in Iraq and in Syria. And that's when people started converting. So she was the one who basically took the institution of imamat and wilayat to the people of Iraq and Syria. But it was in Medina when she laid the foundations of Azza. So what we do is, in today's majalis, we try and remember the atrocities carried out against Imam Hussain and his companions and his family members. And that is the way of Hazrat Zainab Kubra. She mentioned each and every person, for example, from the family members, and then she would say what happened to them. And she would cry and make others cry. And that was exactly the method that she used when she came back to Medina. And she said that stop here for a moment. We will not go into Medina until everyone is ready for us. Imam Sajjad said yes. So he sent a person and he said, go and tell the people of Medina that Imam Hussain al-Islam, my father, has been killed. So he goes and reads some poetry, and that is the method in Arabic, in Persian, Farsi, in Urdu, and even Saraiki, and all the languages that I have heard. They use that method of marthia, or that concept of reading poetry today for making people cry. So Bashir ibn Jadlam goes in and he makes people cry, and he tells that, and the people that went with Imam Hussain al-Islam have come back. She says, I will not enter Medina until everyone is ready. And when she enters, she says, I'll first go to my grandfather, the Holy Prophet. So she enters and she stops for a minute, and she reads the ta'ziyah, or the whole way of reciting masa'ib. She stops for a minute and she says, oh grandfather, I've brought you the news of your grandson's death, his shahada, his martyrdom. And that was her recitation of masa'ib, and that's where we derive it today from. Because Imam Sajjad did not stop. In fact, he was crying himself, and all her family members, all of the people of Medina were crying when she was mentioning how it all happened. And she said, oh grandfather, I saw Shimr sitting on his chest and holding his beard when he was cutting his. And she mentioned all of those things, and the people were crying, screaming. And when everyone stopped, she said, oh grandfather, if there were not people who are not related to me present here, then I would have removed my sleeves to show you the marks on my arms. So this is what we say today. So the whole concept is derived from the actions of Hazrat Zainab Kubra Salamun alayha. And she is the pioneer of the Azadari today, and the whole concept of the mourning on Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Imam Sajjad al-Islam becomes the Imam in the Asr of Ashura. In the eve of Ashura, he becomes the Imam. And he does not say, Ya Allah, I have nothing. He was a captive. He had lost his father just now. He had lost his brothers, his uncles. And yet, not only that he doesn't complain, but he takes it further. His crying is not a messageless crying that he saw the atrocity, so he's crying and he has no control over his emotions. No. He intentionally cries all the life, and he makes a point with that crying, because people ask, till when will you continue? He said, you have not done justice to my message. Nabi Yaqub alayhi salam had lost one son who hadn't died. He was away from his sight, Yusuf alayhi salam. And he cried and he lost his eyes. وَبِيَضَّتْ عَيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْحُزْنِ. The Quran says that he lost his sight because of crying. And I have lost 18 members of my family in one day, who no one can bring the parallel to, who no one can bring the example of. No one is as high as them, like Hussein, like Ali Akbar, like Abbas alayhi salam. So he is the one who actually plays the vital role, because he's a man, he's outside and he cries continuously, and he makes a point that why should I not cry? وَقُتِلَ ابْنُ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ عَطْشَانًا. While the son of the grandson of the Holy Prophet was killed thirsty. So he makes a point, and he is the one who has laid the foundations of the present day Aza.
The whole movement of Karbala is now placed upon his shoulders. So now he goes and he has to bring this to Karbala and eventually back towards Medina and the entire trip. So when Imam Zain al-Abidin had that upon his shoulders, and he himself parts with this movement, he ensured that when he brought this message, he was the one to embody certain actions, so that when he performed those actions, it was clearly recognizable that he was mourning for his father. Famous examples are that when he would walk in the streets of Medina, he would see someone slaughtering a sheep. And at that point, he would begin to weep. His companions and maybe even his enemies standing in the streets of Medina would question, why are you crying when you're seeing a sheep being slaughtered? And he says, because even now that sheep is given something to drink, my father wasn't given anything to drink. Or for example, when he would perform his wudu, he would be given the bowl, and at that point again he would begin to cry and cry, to the extent that the hadith tell us that he turns the water mudaf, which means that it was unusable. It had changed to the point where he couldn't even perform wudu with that water anymore. So the Imam performed these actions to constantly show that no matter what was presented in front of him, it was a means to recall the events of Karbala. Another great example, and this one really moves me because we can even see how it can be brought to life ourselves living in the West or wherever we live. And it's narrated one day that someone comes to the fourth Imam and says that I'm one of your Shia, I'm getting my daughter married. I would like you to attend the wedding, to bless the wedding with your presence. And the Imam responds and says, you know, the murder of my father is still with me. I don't celebrate, I'm not happy, I can't attend this occasion. Please excuse me. The Shia companion is insistent that the Imam participates in the wedding ceremony. So the Imam responds with something so interesting and peculiar. He says, I'll attend on the condition that you bring someone to recite the elegies of Karbala. Now imagine the Imam where he's bringing the life of Karbala to even a marriage ceremony where we're supposed to be joyful and happy. And that really embodies the statement, it really embodies the statement of first, Hal min nasirin yansuruna, is there anyone to help us? But also that every day is Ashura and every land is Karbala. That even on such a day as a wedding occasion, that we can remember Abu Abdullah even for 1 minute. So the narration continues and says that the Imam does attend because the man accepts. And in the gathering before the nikah is taking place, a man stands and he begins to recite the elegy. He's specifically reciting the elegy of Ali al-Akbar, the brother of Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam. The hadith concludes and says that the man, the father of the bride, looks around and he sees that the fourth Imam is no longer sitting in the gathering. So he looks around and he sees that the Imam is at the back where the shoes are. So he goes up and he sits with the Imam and he says, why are you sitting here? You know, why are you sitting inside where the elegy is being recited? And he says, when the man began to recite about my brother Akbar, I saw my grandmother Fatima. She left Baqi and she came to visit this gathering, to listen to what happened to Ali Akbar. How can I sit inside when my grandmother Fatima is sitting outside? And that brings, if we begin to understand that narration, and if we can embody it into our own gatherings, we'll really understand how the fourth Imam brought alive the morning ceremony. It wasn't just Karbala, Damascus, it was about bringing it alive into Medina and everywhere beyond.
Today you see, millions of people coming on Arba'in to Karbala. They go to Karbala to visit Imam Hussain al-Islam. Who are the first Zuwar? It's Imam Sajjad al-Islam, Hazrat Zainab al-Kubra, and those people, one of the companions of the Holy Prophet who had come from Medina, Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari. So he laid the foundations of visiting Imam Hussain al-Islam. He made the turba from, the praying stone that we use. It is Imam Sajjad al-Islam, the first person to make that, the clay stone from the grave of Imam Hussain al-Islam, from that, from the sand or the earth from his grave. He is the first person to make tasbih out of that. He is the one who takes that concept of Karbala to everyone else and delivers it to people in Medina, in Syria, in other places. So he says, spread it. So that was his. He laid the foundations. He is basically the one who found the institution of Azza and Karbala, a revolution, the movement. The whole of the movement was spread by Imam Sajjad.
For me, the spread of the commemoration of Abu Abdullah started with that statement from Imam to Imam Zain al-Abidin, which says, tell my Shia to remember me every time they drink a cold glass of water. You can imagine that responsibility being placed upon the shoulders of Imam Zain al-Abidin. So how he manifested that in his own way. He himself couldn't take that message solely. It wasn't just about one person. He had to ensure that he delivered that so others could deliver it in their own dynamic way. Some traditions tell us that the Imam asked his son, Imam Baqir alayhi salam, to call people from across the Ummah. Now the Ummah is a very wide Ummah by now. It's not just Hijaz of Mecca and Medina, it's not just Damascus, it goes as far as into Africa, which includes Egypt. It includes even the Roman emissaries, that they were present in the court of Yazid, so they were hearing of this incident as well. So when the 50 Imam began to call people and tell them of the incident, they would flock in delegations in their hundreds and thousands back towards Medina to listen firsthand to the events that took place. This being the case, when they themselves returned back to their own constituencies, their own delegations, they were now part and parcel of that ripple effect that we mentioned earlier on. They are going towards the banks, going towards the edges of the ummah, speaking of the message. We have a number of examples of how our imams kept the precedent of mourning going on. So one simple example is that they would talk amongst each other about the incident. So we have traditions, for example, that the 50th Imam, Imam Baqir alayhi salam, would ask his father and say, "Father, what was it like when you had to leave Karbala for Damascus?" And he responds, he says, "Oh my dear son, we were made to ride on unsaddled horses and mules as if we were captors of Rome." And that is there to, really extol the pains in which they were going through. When Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam was on his deathbed after he had been poisoned, the 50th Imam is sitting with him, and he's sitting by his chest on his side, and at this point he turns to his son, he says, "My son Muhammad Baqir, right now you are sitting by my chest, but do you know who was sitting on my father's chest in his final moments?" So firstly, the Imams would discuss amongst themselves. It's not because the 50th Imam wasn't present in Karbala, of course he was, it was because this was their methodology of bringing the narrations about. Also, the Imams used to pay people to come and recite the elegies, especially as the 10th of Muharram came. It would be said that the Imams would walk in clothes that were very tattered on the 10th of Muharram. It was clear that their manners were, their body, their hair, their beard was disheveled. It was as if it was clear from the physical angst and pain that they were going through when they remembered the 10th of Muharram. So people would visit them and they would talk. And they would talk to the Imam, and on this day the Imam would say, "Don't you know what this day is?" And the companions would say, "No." And they say, "This is the 10th of Muharram when my grandfather Hussein was slaughtered, hungry and thirsty." So they would constantly speak as they could. Now when the Ahlul Bayt returned back to Medina after their period in captivity, there are narrations to tell us that they specifically held mourning ceremonies. They would pay people to come and recite the elegies.
And then Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, extremely important. For example, the whole concept of reading the poetry, the marthiya, and the aza to make people cry. It was institutionalized in his time properly, because before him the people did not need anyone to remind them. They would think of the masa'ib and the things that happened in Karbala and would cry. They would mention it to other people, and then it was institutionalized that actually people should remember it. In his time, for example, there is a riwayat that says, a poet, one of his companions came who was a poet, and he said, "Mawla, I've never seen you so, grieved. You are so sorrowful. What's wrong?" He said, "Don't you know?" He said, "No." He said, "Today's Ashura." He said, "What happened on Ashura?" He said, "It was the day when our grandfather Hussein alayhi salam was killed in the plains of Karbala." So he said, "I became very sorrowful." And the Imam alayhi salam said to me, "Your father used to say poetry, do you?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Have you said anything for my grandfather Hussein?" He said, "Yes, I have." He said, "Read it for me, please." And just before he started, he said, "Just wait for a minute." So he called for one of his servants, and he said, "Just place a curtain here, so the women can come and sit down and listen to him as well." So they placed a curtain, and then he sent for a slave girl. He said, "Call my mother and my sisters and my daughters and everyone, my wife." So they all came and sat down, and he said, "Now read, so they also hear you." So you can imagine that the whole institution was being formalized at that time. The word majlis was given to the majlis in the time of the 8th Imam al-Islam. Imam Musa Kazim al-Islam, the 7th Imam al-Islam, had played a major role, but he had seen a lot of imprisonment. So it was his son Imam Rada alayhi salam who had played another major role. And the word majlis was given to this institution. We use the word majlis today. Everyone the Arabs, Iranians, the Indo-Pak, and all others used the word majlis. And that was given in the time of the 8th Imam alayhi salam. The Imam Rida alayhi salam he cries a lot himself, and he is the one who is laying the institution in Iran when he was taken as the crown prince. So it was him who spread, Aza and Tashayyu, for example, the Shia in Iran, Imam Rida alayhi salam. So he took it from Medina to other places basically. So that is the role of. So you can likewise see the roles of each one of the Imams. For example, the 12th Imam alayhi salam, he has Ziyarat al-Nahya, Nahya Muqaddasa, a ziyarat from him, in which he not only just sends his salutations, but he mentions the Masa'ib. For example, he says, salutations be upon my grandfather, Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And then he says, salutations upon him, وَالشِّمْرُ جَالِسٌ عَلَى صَدْرِهِ, while Shimr was sitting on his chest, آخذٌ بِلَحْيَتِهِ, and was holding his beard. And those words truly tell you how the Imams deeply felt, how they strongly felt the pains of Imam Hussain alayhi salam and Zainab Kubra, standing 70 yards away from where Imam Hussain alayhi salam was being killed, and she was watching the murder of Imam Hussain alayhi salam with her own eyes. And she cried at that time. So each one of the Imams actually mentioned those things. So that is the institution.
ولم أكن لمن حاربك محاربا ولمن نصب لك العداوة مناصبا فلأندبنك صباحا ومساء ولأبكين لك بدل الدموع دماء حسرة عليك وتأسفا على ما دهاك وتلهفا حتى أموت بلوعة المصاب.
Nahya is one of our longest ziyarat, and he speaks in depth as to the tragedies. He speaks about Ali Asghar, he speaks about the thirst that overcame, he speaks about the veils being taken, and we have the traditions that cite to us that when the Imam would get to Karbala, he was physically so moved that he would be on his chest crawling towards the grave of Abu Abdullah. And if you imagine, you put this as a jigsaw puzzle, you put all these pieces together, we can see how the Imams really brought the remembrance of Karbala all for us to really hold and take into our own examples. Why is such importance placed upon the visitation of Abu Abdullah? And ultimately the answer stems back to him being the savior of Islam. There is no verse of Quran, there is no takbir from azan, there is no salah that is read today, except that it is because of the sacrifice of Abu Abdullah on the 10th of Muharram. That being the case, Hajj itself would not really exist in the form it exists today had it not been for Abu Abdullah. Therefore it makes sense that to go and visit him is so highly rewarded. Now there's a hadith that tells us our 10th Imam, peace be upon him, was ill once. He was very ill to the point where he couldn't actually get out of bed. So he wanted shafa'ah, he wanted intercession. So he called two of his servants, gave them some money and said, go visit Abu Abdullah in Al-Ha'ir. Al-Ha'ir is this place in Karbala. It's part of it underneath the dome where we go and visit him. And he said, when you go, you need to remember me and ask Abu Abdullah for shafa'ah so that I may receive full health. The companions, they asked him, they said, Ibn Rasulullah, forgive us, aren't you the same as Abu Abdullah? He's ma'soom, infallible Imam, you're ma'soom, infallible Imam. There's no difference between you. Surely you can ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Imam said, yes, it's true, we are the same. But there are certain places which Allah loves to be supplicated in, and one of them is Al-Ha'ir. So go and ask for me in that place, and inshallah I will receive intercession. So we are encouraged on a number of spiritual levels and practical levels to go and visit. If we continue to go and visit, ultimately it is the evidence, it is the manifestation of the prediction of Sayyidah Zainab salamullahi alayha. We mentioned earlier on that she says, Yazid, you will not be able to obliterate our remembrance. And our visitation to Abu Abdullah is testimony to her statement 1400 years ago.
There are 5 signs of a believer. Al-Jahru wa Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. to say Bismillah ar-Rahman loudly. At-takhattum bil-yamin, to wear a ring in the right hand. Ziyaratul Arba'in, to visit Imam Hussain alayhi salam on the day of Arba'in, the 20th of Safar, which is basically 40 days of the Shahadat of Imam Hussain. Many say to at least read the ziyarat. If you can't even visit, then at least read the ziyarat of Arba'in on the day of Arba'in of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. As-salatu ihda wa khamseen, to do 51 rakats every day. 17 rakat wajib and 34 nafilas. Ta'fir bil-jabin, for example, to not do sajda on wood or something else, but to do sajda on the turbat of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. So these are the 5 signs by Imam Hassan Askari alayhi salam. And there are many other traditions on the recitation of the Ziyarat-e-Ashura, Ziyarat-e-Waritha, for example. These are both from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. So there are many traditions.
The way in which we mourn has been questioned many times, be it crying, carrying out matam, or wearing black clothes. But is this something that has been invented by us, or have these practices been encouraged by the Ahlul Bayt themselves?
If you look at now the fatwa, they all say that every society has 2 types of tones they use. One is for celebrations, when they sing certain things in celebrations, and certain things they read with rhythm in mourning. The ones that are used in mourning are allowed in Aza. Likewise, the matam and everything is allowed in Aza. If you look at the fatwa, the history of it goes back to the time of the Holy Prophet and the Aimam alayhi salam. It was something natural. Like I said earlier on, the whole institution went through, it evolved over time. We formalized everything. We'll have a majlis at this time. We'll have Quran recitation. Then we'll have some, recitation in Arabic. Then we'll have a lecture, majlis. And then we'll have, for example, in different languages they call it differently, Latmiya or Sinazani or Matam, for example. These are the 3 words used in Arabic, Farsi and in Urdu. So the whole concept of hitting yourself was formalized. Otherwise it is a natural phenomena that existed in the time of the Holy Prophet and all the Imams. If it wasn't allowed, then they would have said, like for example, there are some traditions that say that you are not allowed to do this for your own father. That you hit yourself so hard that you make a mark on your face or on your chest, or you pull out your hair. These are not allowed. You should control yourself. These words from the Holy Prophet and the Imams tell you that these are not allowed for your own family members. And people ask him, why did you say it is not allowed to do that for your father or son or brother? He said, because it is allowed for the Prophet and his Ahl and his family. So certain, those concepts are not new, but things evolved over time. We formalized everything. These are just natural things that existed, and we do it all the time. Not only the Shia, other Muslims, not only just the Muslims, non-Muslims. This is just natural, you cry naturally. Oh, crying is a bid'ah. Well, it is in nature, human nature, to cry, to feel aggrieved. So these are all natural phenomena.
All over the world, different cultures commemorate the death of Imam al-Hussein, and these practices have set the foundation of how his death is commemorated throughout the world every year.
The beauty of Islam is that it readily accepts with open arms all kinds of culture. Of course, we know the verse that says that we have created you of different tribes and nations so that you may know each other, لِتَعَارَفُوا. So we have a principle where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself has created diversity. And then as part and parcel of that, we have where he states that he has set hudud, he has set boundaries. So as long as those cultures do not break those boundaries, everything is permissible to understand in accordance with your language, your time, your society, your community. And that being the case, as you rightly said, each community tends to remember the mission of Abu Abdullah in their own way. And it's wonderful to see, in fact, to cross the boundaries and see how each community does it differently. I've seen an Afghani community that when they perform matam, they sit down on the floor and they sit in a square facing each other. and they sit on the floor and perform their matam. And that's a wonderful thing to see how they are expressing their love for Abu Abdullah. And then you have other communities that perform plays, and you see some communities bring out an alam, which represents the alam of Abu Fadl Abbas on that day. And you ask yourself, how has this come about? You know, where is this going? And we say, in regards to their history, all of this is based upon the principal methodologies of remembrance. So, for example, we know principally, Ahl al-Bayt gave us the examples that they themselves would perform ma'tam in their own way. It may not be in exactly the same way that we do it today, but it was their own way. As it develops in time and in accordance with our own communities, we all make this ma'tam in our own way. As we said, some sit down, some stand, some do it two-handed, some are in motion, in movement as they do it. And that's the beauty of the expression of Azadari, that it is within the boundaries of how we express our love for Abu Abdullah and our enmity towards the enemies of Ahlul Bayt. This being the case, we see that it's moved, and we see a huge progress, that we have julus, people bring out a horse that represents Zul Janah, and so on and so forth. Even this we can find a precedent within Quran. In the story of Ibrahim, peace be upon him, he comes to that point where he asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for an increase in certainty. And Allah says, what, do you not believe? He says, no, I believe. I just want you to increase my level of understanding. So he brings those 4 birds, he slaughters them and calls them towards him. Now it was the visualization of the birds being called as to how he could understand how we as humankind could be called towards Allah on the Day of Judgment. And therefore the visualization of something increases your understanding, your ma'rifah, your certainty. So when we perform the julus, when we see the alam, when we see Zul Janah, when we see a mihrab, when we see shrines that are small but dedicated, it brings to mind the entire tragedy in a way in which we remember it. And it's great to see how each community is performing their own way of bringing to life.
Bismillah. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Like when I came in this country, because we used to do Zul Janah in Pakistan for my forefathers, my father, my grandfather, everyone. So when I came here, so when we go to procession, I feel that we have to something missing there. So we must need some Zul Janah as a ziyarat, because that's main thing in the Julus or procession, the Zul Janah, because that's remembrance of Imam Hussain al-Islam, because we do the Julus for Imam Hussain al-Islam, so that's why we keep him all the time with the Julus or procession. So that's why I realized we have missing, so we must need one Zul Janah with the Julus, and we start looking after him. First time I take him in the procession, he was only 1 year 6 months old. His age he was too young, but because he mansoob only for the procession, only for ziyarat of Imam Hussain al-Islam. That's why he, from his childhood, he is just doing only the Zul Janah. So every time, wherever the procession in the UK, he goes there, do his job. That's his duty, and my duty is to take him to the procession. If you go from start, from the 10th of Muharram, when the Mawla Hussain al-Islam go on the battlefield, and he got shaheed. So Zul Janah take around to the Mawla Hussain. He circle around. He never allow anyone to come to near to the Mawla Hussain al-Islam. Then after a short while, Mawla Hussain asked the Zul Janah, you go in the tent, go back in the tent and tell them that I'm been shaheed. So then the Zul Janah lay down near to the Mawla Hussain and asked him, Mawla, if you want, jump on me, I will take back you to Medina. Mawla says, no, this is my last time. I'm doing everything for Raza Ilahi. So I have to be, so you go back. Mawla put some blood, he put some blood on his face, Imam Hussein's blood, to tell the people in the tents, the Bibiyas, all Bibi and Bibi Zainab Salamullahi, Bibi Skina Salamullahi. But because I'm doing this, so I try to get some history about the Zul Janah, where he's come from, when he start taking the procession. In my knowledge, I heard that in Afghanistan, They start taking the, because in Arab countries, if you see that in Arab countries, they do the whole thing in like in the shape of drama. So whenever they come, some of they act either Imam Hussein, some of act the other Shoda. Obviously, they come to sit in that on the horses. But in our culture, we can't act as a Imam Hussein. I'm not asking that they're doing wrong. They're their beliefs, that their way of, that their culture. But in my culture, we can't do that. So same as we get the alam. So they start bringing the Zuljana. First of all, they start bringing the Zuljan like not the real horse, fake horse. After that, they start bringing using the real horse as a Zuljana. When they start using the real horse as a Zuljana, then they think, no, we keep the horse, that's only for the purpose of Zuljana. That's why wherever you see the Zuljana, that's only for the purpose of Zuljana. No one else ride him, only because if the Mawla Hussain can sit down, we can't. Everything remind you about the Mawla. When you go for the Majlis or procession, when you see that some alam, you state where you remind Imam Mawla Abbas al-Islam. When you see the Jhula, you state where you think about the Azadari al-Islam. When you see the Zuljana, you state where you go to Imam Hussain, or everything, all pictures come in your mind. This is the Zuljana. Mawla sitting on his horse, he's gone in the battlefield, and he's empty now. Mawla has been shaheed. So when you see the Zuljana, state where you think about the Mawla Hussain. In the Karbala, everyone goes on his own horse. Mawla Abbas go on his own horse, his name is Ashal. Ali Akbar al-Islam go on his horse, his name is Uqab. Mawla Hussain go on his own horse, his name is Murtajis. But the thing is, whenever you see the Zuljana, you only remind the Mawla Hussain, because they're properly symbolized to the Mawla Hussain. We don't call him as a god. He's Rahwar Hussain, he's the Mawla Hussain's horse, he belongs to Mawla Hussain. So we have to think on this way. The people that just say the worship, you can say anything. Everyone can go, they can give own comments. But like we do the matam, the people say, why are you beating yourself? If anybody got some pain, he's sad, that's his natural thing. He do that like this. Hi. The first sound come out from his mouth, he say hi. So that's the same thing. When we see that Mawla bin shaheed, we got the pain of our Imam Hussain. That's we say hi. Hi Hussain. Is anything wrong? I don't think so. Is anything wrong? Our religion is very near to same to the nature. This is nature. If you sad for anything, you sad. You cry. Can we stop Matandari? No. We can't stop Majlis? No. Can we stop processions? No. If we can't stop anything, how can we stop the Zuljana? I told you the Zuljana is the main thing in the procession. Wherever you do the procession for Imam Hussain al-Islam, the Zuljana is the main symbol. Same as the alam. Mawla Abbas alam is the same. We can't stop taking the alam into the procession because it's symbolized to the Mawla Abbas. The Zuljana is symbolized to Mawla because it belongs to Imam Hussain al-Islam. We can't stop the Zuljana. It's important.
There's a fatwa from Khomeini that however way, in whichever culture, in whichever language people do the Azadari of Imam Hussain, it is permissible. The concept, Islamic concept was to mourn. How you did it was cultural. Islam says these are the things which are allowed for you to eat. How you cook them is the cultural. You have to slaughter the animal and then you can just eat the meat. You can cook it and eat. How you cook it, it's cultural. Islam does not say you have to carry out exactly certain things. Islam says these are the ibadat, you have to do them. Namaz, for example, the prayer, the daily salat, the fasting. Well, fasting is only not doing something. It's not doing something. It is the abstaining from things. Hajj, for example. So there are certain things that you have to do exactly the way. Certain things Islam says that you choose how to do it. You have to cover yourself. It is a cultural way, a cultural thing, how you cover yourself and what you wear. Aza itself was to mourn and remember Imam Hussain Islam is Islamic. How you do it is cultural. There will be certain boundaries. It shouldn't contradict with the teachings of Islam. That you can't do. Islam has made a circle. Everything must fit into the circle. It should not be out of that circle. And that's where all these different cultures started their own things, and the scholars would intervene and say, okay, you can't do this, and you can. So, and our scholars do point out, but all of it is cultural. And it is permissible to do it the way people are doing it, all the different things. Alam, for example, is a whole concept because Al-Abbas al-Islam lost his arms. So it is an arm on top of the flag, the banner. It is the hand of Abbas al-Islam. And many times people have a moon because he was Qamar Bani Hashim. He was the moon of the Bani Hashim, of the Hashemites. So they have that moon beneath it. But the whole concept of flag existed in Karbala, even before Karbala, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. So that whole concept existed. We formalized certain things and took them further for the people to understand, because Azadari, the whole concept of Aza was not for just mourning for ourselves, but also to spread that message to others. When we took it to other people, we had to give them a message through it. So when we took a taboot, for example, a coffin, and people said, well, what's this? It's not a real taboot. It is a replica of, because we were not present and we were showing our love for Imam Hussain alayhi salam. So we had to take that message to others. Ta'ziya Khani, for example, in Farsi, in Iraq and in Iran, they have the whole, they act the whole Karbala out. And it makes people cry. So there were different, whatever way you can spread the whole institution, it is permissible. So long as it does not give a bad name to religion and it does not cause a serious harm to oneself, it is permissible. That is the fatwa of our fuqaha.
These cultural practices have helped spread the commemoration of the martyrdom of Imam al-Hussein throughout time. However, with new generations to come, how will the commemoration of the death of Imam al-Hussein evolve in the future? And what methods are being created to ensure his message lives on forever?
The purpose of Imam Hussain Islam's rising was that he was saying that I want to li'amara bil ma'ruf wa anha anil munkar. I want to enjoin the good and forbid the evil. Imam Hussain al-Islam is the greatest ma'ruf, he's the greatest good. So we need to feel responsible that we need to deliver it to other people. Because these people in Europe and in North America may hold us responsible on the Day of Judgment. Ya Allah, these people, oh Hussein, these people did not convey your message to us. We would have followed. Because I do believe that if we truly delivered the message of Imam Hussain Islam to the locals in these countries, wallahi, I'm not just exaggerating, I believe in this, they would follow. They would surely follow in Europe and in North America if we properly deliver the message to them. We haven't delivered. We are responsible. So we have to think of new methods of delivering this message, the true message of Imam Hussain Islam, to the people, and they will surely come to his path.
Especially in the world in which we're living today. There are marches in New York and sit-ins in London, and people are standing up against economic oppression and political oppression. And that's exactly what Aba Abdullah stood for. That's exactly what he wanted. He called his movement on the basis of Islah, reformation. So the movement of Karbala today is taking a new format. It's looking at how we can speak on removing tyranny throughout the world. That's Azadari in its own self. It's talking about, in the universities today, it's talking about freedom of thought and speech, and that's what Abu Abdullah stood for. He said in his final moments on the 10th of Muharram, if you do not have a religion, at least be free in yourself. So that was part of Azadari. And then we see the Imam gave his blood and his life. We too were able to do blood drives, and we go and we give blood to hospitals that are in desperate need of blood in the name of Aba Abdullah. And when hospitals, when ambulance services hear of this, their first way of learning of the movement of Karbala is through such positive means. And that's how the movement is shifting in its dynamic today. And that's how the youth need to continue to move in time.
The Imam Hussein Blood Donation Campaign is a campaign to encourage Muslims to donate blood in the name of Imam Hussein. We started 7 years ago in the city of Manchester, where we encouraged a group of Muslims to donate blood just through word of mouth. And ever since then, the campaign's been growing in numbers, and also the number of cities that have been signing up has increased as well. I think for Muslims it's really important for them to make this connection of Imam Hussein and donating blood, because in the Quran itself it says, if you save one life, it's as if you've saved the whole of mankind. And from the National Blood Service, they tell us that one bag can potentially save 3 lives. So for a Muslim, this is great encouragement in a way that they can make the connection and help the society that they live in. And helping the society is something that's fundamental in our faith, I believe. As we know from Imam Ali's hadith, if you're not my brother in faith, you're my brother in humanity. So why not help these fellow humans? I think blood donation is a modern way to express your love for Imam Hussein and to remember his sacrifice. And although it's not a tradition, the aim of the campaign is to make this a tradition, that in every Muharram, every year, people do donate out of their own will, just out of remembrance of Imam Hussein. For the future, we wish that people make that connection between blood donation and Imam Hussein. And when they do donate, they do it in his name, and they remember the sacrifice that he made. And hopefully to reflect his message onto non-Muslims as well. In the past, we've had a lot of nurses and staff and people that come off the street come and ask us, why are there so many Muslims donating today? And we obviously start and tell them that, a person called Imam Hussein, who was the grandson of the Prophet of Islam, was sacrificed. And we go into the whole story and explain to them exactly why and what he did. So that connection can help the future. There hasn't been much controversy in this campaign. A lot of people have asked whether or not it's permissible to donate blood or not. And we have the backing by the major Shia ulama to say that it is permissible to donate blood. With organ donation, it's a slightly different issue, but with blood donation, there isn't the issue there. The link between blood donation and zanjir or tatbir, or self-flagellation, is always going to hover around this campaign, unfortunately. The Imam Hussein Blood Donation Campaign is just an alternative way to express people's love for Imam Hussein, and in no way is negative or has negative views against any other method of expressing people's feelings towards Imam Hussein.
Ashura Awareness Week is it's a week that Ahlul Bayt societies in universities across England pick a specific campaign, charity campaign, that we work towards to raise awareness of, raise funds for, whatever they need us to do, in the spirit of kind of doing good, helping other people, mainly, and also spreading the message of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. The idea of Ashura Awareness Week, of calling it, naming it after Ashura, is more for us as opposed to for other people. Not so much to spread the message of Ashura, although this should be an objective, but for us it's 10 days where we should be proactive, do something good, not just sit around and be sad, but Imam Hussein wants us to do something good for mankind. So yeah, for us to be proactive, do some good, and help spread his message at the same time.
We've held a variety of events for Ashura Awareness Week over the years. Some of those include events about the character of Imam Hussein himself, and other events about the principles for which he stood. We've had various stalls where we actually try and implement the message of Islam and the message of Imam Hussein by enforcing justice and trying to spread awareness of human rights issues and various other messages that Imam Hussein stood for. One of the examples that springs to mind is the Thirsty for Justice campaign, in which bottles of water were distributed and awareness was raised about water and sanitation issues that are affecting various countries to a large extent, which many people are unaware about. And it's these kinds of initiatives that really is showing the great effect that Imam Hussein is having on our lives even today.
And then we'll definitely be having some talks and discussions for the community within university, just because in university, because it's so diverse and you have so many different people, it's really hard to kind of focus on something, especially when it becomes so specific to a specific part of Islam. You can't talk about it like very openly in university because it's kind of, especially when it's so emotive. And I think when you have a platform like Ahlul Bayt Society, you have a time and a place where it's just, you know, you can talk, you can share your feelings, you can become a lot more spiritual in university, and you don't have to hide it away at home. It can become part of university life. Everyone bonds through it. You make a really good set of friends and communities. And I think that doing something, having talks specifically around for the Muslim community in university really helps to not, it sounds bad, but not be embarrassed by it, not to be ashamed of it. You say, yeah, I'm doing this, it's Muharram, I have to go here, but you're not doing it alone because you've got your community inside university as well.
Imam Hussein is not just a person who featured in a battle hundreds or thousands of years ago. He is a symbol of truth and justice and upholding that justice. And that's the message that we're giving out to the people today through Ashura Awareness Week and through these activities. And we hope that that message resonates within the wider student body, inshallah.
Personally, I would like to achieve a more spiritual connection with Muharram and Imam Hussein. I've always found it very difficult in the past, mainly because I don't have a very cultural grounding in religion. And with all the cultural practices, I find it very hard to relate. So this year I'm going to try my hardest to relate on a more profound spiritual level. In terms of ABSOC, we were talking about focusing on human rights, specifically with children, because they're, at the end of the day, they can't really help themselves, so who else will help them? And talking of education, and because they are the future. Sounds cheesy, but they are. So ABSOC-wise, education for children, hopefully.
We're at a very crucial stage here where many of the young Muslims who are attending university are perhaps unsure of where their future is in relation to Islam. And I think what ABSOC is doing is it's providing that platform, providing that connection so that young Muslims, young students are able to connect with Islam and to connect with the message of Imam Hussein on a very strong level. And through that, spreading that message, not just amongst the membership of ABSOC, but to the wider student body as well. And obviously these are people who are going to be teachers, professionals, lawyers, doctors in the future. And through this process, I believe that that will have a great impact on the future of our society.
The first thing that we need to mention is that the mourning for Abu Abdullah, peace be upon him, is guaranteed to remain. We have that famous tradition where after a few minutes of being born, he's being given in the arms of Rasulullah, and Rasulullah begins to weep. And Sayyidah Zahra salamullahi alayha asks, why are you crying? And he says, because of what will happen to him in Karbala, he will die thirsty. And she says, will you be there, Ya Rasulullah? No, I will not be there. Will Ali be there? No, he will not be there. Will Hassan be there? No, he will not be there. He will be alone. But Allah will raise up a community that will remember him until the end of time. Now with that remembrance, as with everything else in our religion, it needs to be adopted in line in the time in which we live in. That doesn't mean we move away from the principles of Azadari, but we need to continue to adopt it. So how will it be adopted? I would like to envisage firstly that when we are speaking of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, the first thing that we try to express of him is his own specific message. Now his message was based upon the term Islah, reformation. Now I'm looking at myself here before I look at anyone else. It's now 11 months since the last time Muharram came. Where was I spiritually 1 year ago? And where am I today? Am I the same, or have I bettered myself, or have I become worse? The Imam's movement was based upon reformation. So Azadari principally needs to be based upon reformation. If there's no reformation, the Azadari is pointless. So that needs to be understood in terms of where Azadari is going in the future. Then it needs to be brought to the point where it can be in sync with all of humanity that don't necessarily believe what we believe. Because Imam's message is universal, it needs to be brought to the point where they, a non-Muslim and a non-Shia, will also participate in the same message. So for example, our julus. At the moment, Azadari, one of the constituent parts is the julus. We walk on the streets, we have flags in protest. At the moment, our flags are in protest, or many of our julus are in protest of Yazid, as opposed to inviting the wider world and saying we are inviting you to oppose every Yazid. Come with us because we want to tell you a message. On 10th of Muharram, a man stood, lived and died for this message. His message is universal. You believe in Jesus? He believed in Jesus. You believe in Moses? He believed in Moses. Come with us so that on the 10th of Muharram, or whenever this julus is in whichever city, it is no longer confined to the Shia. It is broader so that the world is marching on the 10th of Muharram or whatever day that takes place. That's the second thing. And the last thing I would like to see is that the message of Imam was that he died hungry and thirsty. No human being should die that way. Human beings were born to be righteous human beings and to be given enough to have their basic amenities given to them. That's the right of a human being. And the Imam showed this, that when he was in the plains of Karbala and the others needed drink and water, he was very happy to give everybody else water and drink. I would like to see the remembrance of Azadari get to the point where there's no human being in this world who dies hungry and thirsty. Unfortunately, we have it. We have it in Somalia, we have it in other places in Africa, we have it in places in India and Pakistan when floods come and there is not enough medicine, there is not aid, there is not the practical steps in preparation for when monsoon seasons come. Imam was a human being of the highest of humanity of caliber, and he doesn't want someone to die in a state of ignominy. And we need to get to the point where no human being dies in a state of humiliation. They die as they deserve to die, and they are buried as they deserve to be buried. Abu Abdullah wasn't given that. We cry over that. We mourn over that. How can we not afford the rest of humanity?